The sun beat down mercilessly on the Arizona Territory landscape. As Zara Nolan opened her eyes to find nothing but endless scrub, brush, and red earth stretching in every direction. The wagon train that had been her only hope of reaching California now vanished beyond the horizon like a fever dream. She sat up slowly, her body aching from where she had fallen the night before while searching for her missing canteen in the darkness. The sharp pain in her ankle made her gasp as memory flooded back. She had wandered too far from camp, stumbled into a wash, and by the time she had climbed out, disoriented and hurting, the wagons were gone. She had called out until her voice grew hoarse, had tried to follow their tracks in the moonlight, but the pain in her ankle had forced her to stop. She must have passed out from exhaustion, and now the morning sun revealed the terrible truth. They had left without her. Panic clawed at her chest as she looked around desperately for any sign of the wagon train. Her small traveling bag lay beside her, but she had no food, barely any water, and no horse. The year was 1883, and out here in the Arizona wilderness, being alone meant almost certain death. The wagon master had made that clear enough when they departed from Santa Fe 3 weeks ago. Stay close, stay together, or die alone in the desert. Zara pressed her hands to her face, fighting back tears that would only waste precious moisture. She was 22 years old, had survived losing both parents to influenza back in Missouri, had sold everything she owned to pay for passage west, and now she was going to die out here because she had been careless enough to lose her canteen. The irony was not lost on her. She forced herself to think rationally. The wagon train had been heading northwest toward a settlement called Mineral Park where they planned to resupply. If she could somehow make it there on foot, she might survive. But her ankle was badly swollen, and she had no idea how far the town might be. 10 miles. 20. 50. The landscape gave no clues, just endless rolling desert punctuated by scraggly mesquite and the occasional towering saguaro cactus standing like sentinels against the brilliant blue sky. The heat was already becoming oppressive even though it could not be much past 8 in the morning. Zara knew she needed to find shade and conserve her energy. She dragged herself toward a nearby cluster of rocks, biting her lip against the pain shooting through her ankle with every movement. Once she reached the meager shade, she allowed herself a tiny sip from her canteen. The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was life itself. Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zara drifted in and out of consciousness as the sun climbed higher, turning her rocky shelter into an oven despite the shade. She tried to stay alert, to watch for any sign of help, but exhaustion and pain dragged at her like physical weights. In her more lucid moments, she wondered if anyone from the wagon train would notice she was missing. She had kept mostly to herself during the journey, a quiet woman traveling alone, and the other families had their own concerns. By the time they realized she was gone, they would be too far ahead to turn back. No one abandoned a schedule on the frontier for one lost woman. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon when Zara heard something that made her heart leap. The sound of hoofbeats, steady and rhythmic, coming closer. She tried to call out, but her throat was so dry that only a croak emerged. Frantically, she grabbed a rock and struck it against another, the sharp crack echoing across the desert. She did it again and again, praying whoever was out there would hear. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence stretched out, broken only by the whisper of wind through the brush. Then a man's voice called out, cautious but clear. "Hello, someone out there." Zara tried again to speak, managed a weak help, before another fit of coughing seized her. The hoofbeats resumed, faster now, and then a horse and rider appeared around the rocky outcropping. The man sat tall in the saddle, his weathered face shaded by a wide-brimmed hat, a red bandana tied around his neck. He had the lean, hard look of someone who had spent his entire life outdoors, probably close to 25 or 26 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were a startling green even from a distance. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy: dusty denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, worn leather vest, and boots that had seen better days. Those green eyes widened when they found her huddled in the rocks. He was off his horse in an instant, dropping to one knee beside her, his canteen already in his hands. "Easy now," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Slow sips. Too fast and you'll just bring it back up." Zara obeyed, her shaking hands clutching the canteen as she let the cool water touch her cracked lips. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. After a few small sips, he gently pulled the canteen back. "More in a minute," he promised. His eyes scanned her quickly, taking in her condition with the practiced assessment of someone used to emergencies. "Your ankle," she nodded weakly. "Fell last night. The wagon train, they left without me." Something dark flickered across his face. "Which train?" "The one headed through to California." "Yes, we were supposed to resupply at Mineral Park. I passed them about 6 miles northwest of here this morning," he said, his jaw tightening. "They didn't mention anyone missing." The words hit her like a physical blow. They knew. They had to know by now, and they had not even mentioned it to a passing traveler. The reality of how little her life had mattered to them settled over her like a shroud. The cowboy must have seen something in her face because his expression softened. He placed a warm hand on her shoulder, and the simple human contact after hours of terrifying isolation nearly undid her. "Hey," he said quietly. "You're not alone. I'm Finn Morrison. I work a ranch about 12 miles south of here. I'm going to get you somewhere safe, understand?" Zara nodded, blinking back tears. "Zara Nolan," she managed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Finn said, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes that took the edge off the words. "We need to get you out of this heat. Can you ride?" "I think so. My ankle is bad, but I can hold on." Finn studied her for a moment, then made a decision. "I'm going to lift you onto my horse. It's going to hurt. I'm sorry for that." He was as gentle as possible, but Zara still had to bite back a cry when he picked her up. He was stronger than his lean frame suggested, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. The horse, a sturdy roan gelding, stood perfectly still as Finn settled her in the saddle. Then he swung up behind her, one arm coming around her waist to steady her. "Lean back against me," he instructed. "It's a couple hours' ride to the ranch. If you need to stop, you tell me." Zara had no choice but to relax against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him at her back. Under different circumstances, she would have been mortified by the intimacy of it, but survival overrode propriety. As Finn urged the horse into a steady walk, she let her eyes close, focusing on breathing through the pain and not falling from the saddle. "Tell me about yourself," Finn said after a while, his voice rumbling through his chest. "Keep talking if you can. Help you stay awake." It took effort, but Zara forced herself to speak. "Not much to tell. I'm from Missouri originally. My parents died last year. I had a small inheritance, enough for the wagon train. I have an aunt in Sacramento. She wrote saying I could stay with her, help with her boarding house." "That's more than not much," Finn said. "Took courage to make that journey alone, or desperation," Zara replied honestly. "There was nothing left for me in Missouri. Every place I looked had memories." "I understand that." Something in his tone suggested he really did. "I came out west for similar reasons 7 years ago. Sometimes running toward something new is the same as running away from something painful." "What did you run from?" The words came out before Zara could stop them. "Sorry, that's too personal. It's all right." Finn was quiet for a moment, the horse's hoofbeats filling the silence. "My family had a farm in Texas. Drought took everything. My father drank himself to death after we lost the land. My mother followed him 6 months later, just gave up. I was 19 with a younger brother to care for. We headed to Arizona Territory, heard the ranches were hiring. My brother Daniel is 21 now, works the ranch with me. I'm sorry about your parents. I'm sorry about yours." His arm tightened slightly around her waist. "But we're still here. That counts for something." They rode on as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Zara faded in and out, the rhythmic movement of the horse and the exhaustion pulling her under despite her best efforts. Each time she started to slip sideways, Finn's arm steadied her, and his low voice called her back. "Stay with me, Zara. We're almost there. You can see the ranch lights just ahead." She forced her eyes open and saw, in the deepening twilight, the warm glow of lamplight in the distance. Buildings took shape as they drew closer. A ranch house, barn, corral, and a few outbuildings. It was modest but well-maintained, the kind of place built by hard work and determination. A young man emerged from the barn, lantern in hand, his face creasing with concern when he saw Finn riding double. "What happened?" "Found her in the desert. Her wagon train left her behind." "Daniel, this is Zara Nolan. She needs help." Finn dismounted smoothly, then reached up to carefully lift Zara down. "Can you tend to Copper? I'm going to get her inside." Daniel was already moving toward them. He had the same lean build as his brother but lighter hair and blue eyes. "I'll take care of him. There's stew left from supper. I'll bring some in." Finn carried Zara into the ranch house, kicking the door open and making his way to a small bedroom off the main room. The house was simple but clean, furnished with handmade furniture and lacking any woman's touch. He set her carefully on the bed. "Let me get some water heating. We need to look at that ankle properly." Zara lay back against the pillow, overwhelmed by the sudden safety after hours of terror. The room spun slightly, and she closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of Finn moving around the house. He returned a few minutes later with a basin of water, clean cloths, and what looked like medical supplies. "I'm going to need to take your boot off," he said, setting everything down on a small table beside the bed. "It's going to hurt like hell." She nodded, bracing herself. Even with Finn's careful touch, the pain of removing the boot made her gasp and grip the quilt beneath her. Her ankle was grotesquely swollen, purple and angry-looking. Finn's expression grew grim as he examined it. "Don't think it's broken," he said finally. "But it's a bad sprain. You won't be walking on it for a while." He began to gently clean the dirt and dried blood from her foot and ankle. "You've got some nasty scrapes, too. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday. Breakfast before we broke camp." Finn shook his head. "We'll get food into you soon. First, let me wrap this ankle." He worked with practiced efficiency, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone who made his living with hard labor. As he wrapped the injured ankle with strips of clean cloth, Daniel appeared with a bowl of stew and a cup of water. The younger Morrison brother had a kind face, open and earnest. "Finn told me what happened," Daniel said, setting the food on the table. "That's a terrible thing, leaving someone behind like that. What kind of people do that?" "The kind who care more about schedules than lives," Finn said flatly. He finished with the bandage and helped Zara sit up, propping pillows behind her. "There you go. Now eat slowly. Your stomach's going to be confused after going without." The stew was simple, beef and vegetables, but it tasted better than anything Zara could remember. She ate slowly as instructed, aware of both men watching her with concern. Between bites, she said, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life." "You don't need to thank us," Finn replied. "This is what decent people do." He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "You said you were heading to Sacramento, to your aunt." "Yes. She's the only family I have left." Zara paused, reality settling in. "I had enough money for the wagon train with a little left over, but not enough to get myself from here to California now, and I can't work until my ankle heals." "Don't worry about that right now," Finn said firmly. "You need to rest and heal. We'll figure out the rest later." "I won't be a burden on you," Zara insisted. "I can work. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. Once I can stand properly, I can earn my keep." Daniel grinned. "We could use help with the cooking. Finn's stew is edible, but that's about the best you can say for it." "It keeps us alive," Finn protested, but there was humor in his eyes. "But yes, having someone who actually knows what they're doing in the kitchen would be welcome." He grew more serious. "Zara, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need to. Once you're healed, if you still want to go to California, we'll help you get there. But there's no rush. Recover first." The kindness in his words after the cruelty of being abandoned made tears prick at Zara's eyes again. She blinked them back stubbornly. "You don't even know me." "I know you survived being left for dead in the desert," Finn said quietly. "I know you've got courage. That's enough." Over the next few days, Zara began to understand the rhythm of the Morrison ranch. The brothers rose before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, worked through the heat of the day, and returned exhausted as the sun set. It was hard, relentless labor, but they never complained. Finn had a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that made Zara feel safe. He checked on her ankle twice a day, changing the bandages and making sure the swelling was going down. By the fourth day, she insisted on leaving the bed despite his protests. Using a crutch Daniel fashioned for her, she hobbled into the kitchen and began taking stock. The pantry was poorly organized but adequately supplied. The stove was serviceable. She could work with this. That evening, when Finn and Daniel came in from their work, they stopped dead in the doorway. The house smelled of fresh bread and roasted chicken. The table was set properly, and Zara stood by the stove, stirring gravy with a look of concentration on her face. "What are you doing up?" Finn demanded, moving quickly to her side. "You should be resting." "I've been resting for days," Zara replied. "I needed to do something useful. Besides, my ankle feels better when I move around a little." "She's got you there," Daniel said cheerfully, already sitting down at the table. "This smells incredible." The meal was a success, both brothers eating with the enthusiasm of men who had been subsisting on their own basic cooking for too long. Finn kept glancing at Zara throughout dinner, something unreadable in his expression. When Daniel went out to check on the horses one last time, Finn helped Zara with the dishes despite her protests. "You don't have to prove anything to us," he said quietly as he dried a plate. "We don't expect you to work for your keep." "I know," Zara replied, "but I need to feel useful. After being left behind like I was nothing, like my life didn't matter, I need to feel like I have value." She paused, her hands stilling in the wash water. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Finn set down the plate and turned to face her. "But Zara, your value isn't in what you can do for other people. You matter because you're a person. You matter because you're you." The intensity in his green eyes made her heart skip. She looked away, flustered. "That's kind of you to say." "It's not kindness, it's truth." He picked up another plate to dry, and the moment passed, but something had shifted between them. The days stretched into weeks. Zara's ankle healed slowly but surely, and she became an integral part of the ranch household. She took over all the cooking, organized the house, mended the brothers' worn clothes, and even helped with some of the lighter chores once she could walk without the crutch. She learned that Finn had a deft hand with injured animals, that he read books in the evenings when he had energy, that he had a quiet sense of humor that snuck up on you. She learned that Daniel was courting a girl in Mineral Park named Sarah, that he wanted to save up enough to buy his own piece of land someday, that he played the harmonica beautifully on Sunday evenings. She also learned that Finn Morrison was the most decent man she had ever met. He never pushed, never demanded, treated her with unfailing respect. But she caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made warmth pool in her chest. And she found herself watching him in return, noticing the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked, the way his rare smiles transformed his serious face, the way his hands were gentle even when they were scarred and calloused. One evening in early October, about 6 weeks after Finn had found her in the desert, they sat together on the porch after Daniel had ridden into town. The desert night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Zara was darning one of Finn's shirts, and he was oiling his saddle, but the comfortable silence between them felt charged with unspoken words. "I sent a letter to my aunt," Zara said finally. "Told her what happened, that I was safe, that I would come to Sacramento once I had the money." Finn's hands stilled on the leather. "What did she say?" "I just posted it last week when Daniel went to town. I won't hear back for a while yet." Zara set down her mending. "Finn, I've been thinking. Mineral Park needs a school teacher. I heard Mrs. Henderson at the general store mention it. I taught at a small school back in Missouri before my parents got sick. If I could get that position, I could save up, pay you back for everything you've done." "You don't owe us anything," Finn said immediately. "I know, but I want to." She hesitated. "Also, I thought if I had a position here, I wouldn't have to leave right away." The words hung in the air between them. Finn slowly set aside the saddle and turned to face her fully. "Do you want to stay?" Zara's heart hammered in her chest. "Yes, I do. Because of the job." His voice was careful, controlled. "No," she met his eyes directly. "Because of you." Finn drew in a sharp breath. "Zara, I know it's probably foolish," she rushed on. "I know I've only been here 6 weeks. But Finn, when you found me in that desert, when you said I wasn't alone, something changed. Every day since then, I've felt more at home here than I ever did in Missouri. And it's not just the ranch or the work. It's you. The way you make me feel safe. The way you look at me like I matter. The way you're kind without expecting anything in return." Finn stood abruptly, and for a terrible moment, Zara thought she had ruined everything. But then he held out his hand to her. She took it, letting him draw her to her feet. They stood close together in the lamplight spilling from the house, and she could see the emotions warring on his face. "I've been trying to give you space," he said roughly. "Trying not to take advantage. You've been through trauma. You're vulnerable. The last thing I wanted was to make you feel obligated or pressured." "I don't feel pressured," Zara said softly. "I feel, for the first time in a long time, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Finn raised his hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her cheek. His palm was warm and rough against her skin. "I care about you, Zara, more than I have any right to after such a short time, but I can't ignore it anymore. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. I find excuses to come back to the house during the day just to see you. Daniel's been giving me hell about it for weeks." Zara laughed shakily, tears pricking her eyes. "I do the same thing. I watch for you from the kitchen window. I make your favorite meals just to see you smile." "Then stay," Finn said fiercely. "Not as someone passing through, not as someone working off a debt. Stay because you want to build something here, with me. We'll apply for that teaching position if that's what you want. We'll do whatever makes sense. But please don't leave because you think that's what you're supposed to do." Instead of answering with words, Zara rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a question, but Finn responded immediately, his arms coming around her and pulling her close. The kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and profound, a promise being sealed between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes," Zara whispered. They stood wrapped in each other's arms under the vast Arizona sky, and Zara marveled at how life could change so drastically. 2 months ago, she had been dying alone in the desert. Now she was being held by a man who looked at her like she was precious, standing in front of a home that felt more real than anywhere she had ever lived. The next few weeks brought their own challenges and joys. Zara did apply for the teaching position in Mineral Park, and after a demonstration lesson and interview with the town council, she was hired to start after the new year. The salary was modest but respectable, and the council was pleased to find a qualified teacher with experience. Finn beamed with pride when she told him the news, sweeping her up in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. Their relationship deepened as autumn progressed. They took walks in the evenings when the work was done, Finn showing her the land he loved and sharing his dreams of expanding the ranch. Zara told him stories about her childhood, about her parents, about the life she had left behind. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and hopes and fears. Daniel was delighted by the development, though he teased them mercilessly. "About time you two stopped dancing around each other," he declared one evening. The tension was getting thick enough to cut with a knife. Finn threw a biscuit at him, which Daniel caught and ate with a grin. But later, when Daniel was out with Sarah, Finn grew serious. "I want to do this right," he told Zara as they sat together on the porch, her hand in his. "I know things are different out here, less formal, but you deserve to be courted properly. You deserve romance and respect." "You give me both every day," Zara replied, squeezing his hand. "Just being with you is enough." "It's not, though." Finn turned to face her fully. "Zara Nolan, I'm going to marry you someday. I know it's fast. I know people will say we're rushing, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're it for me. The only question is when you'll have me." Zara's breath caught. "Finn, I'm not asking yet," he said quickly. "I want to give you time to be sure. I want you to start your teaching job, to have your own money and independence, to know you're choosing this life because you truly want it, not because you're grateful or feel obligated. But I'm telling you my intentions. I'm telling you that I love you and I want to spend my life making you happy." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. "I love you too, and I already know my answer, but if you want to wait, I'll wait." Finn kissed her then, tender and sweet, and Zara felt the last pieces of her heart that had been broken by her parents' deaths and the wagon train's cruelty knit back together. She was whole again, and more than that, she was loved. A letter arrived from her aunt in late November. Zara opened it with shaking hands, Finn standing supportively beside her. As she read, relief flooded through her. Her aunt wrote that she was glad Zara was safe and happy. She had met a gentleman herself and was planning to marry and move to Oregon. The boarding house was being sold. She wished Zara every happiness and enclosed a small amount of money as a belated inheritance from a distant cousin. "So much for Sacramento," Zara said, looking up at Finn with a watery smile. "I suppose Arizona Territory is home now." "Is that all right?" Finn asked, searching her face. "It's perfect. It's exactly what I want." In December, Finn took Zara into Mineral Park to visit the jeweler, such as he was. The man worked primarily as a blacksmith but had skill with smaller metalwork as well. Together, they designed a simple ring, a gold band with a small turquoise stone, the blue-green gem that seemed to capture the Arizona sky. On Christmas Eve, with Daniel and Sarah as witnesses, Finn got down on one knee in front of the fireplace in the ranch house. "Zara Nolan," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "You came into my life when I found you in the desert, but the truth is, you saved me just as much as I saved you. You brought light and warmth and love into this house. You made me believe in the future again. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Zara said through happy tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring fit perfectly. They kissed while Daniel whooped and Sarah clapped, and then there was laughter and celebration. It was the best Christmas Zara had ever known. They were married in February 1884, in the small church in Mineral Park. Zara wore a dress she had sewn herself from beautiful fabric Finn had insisted on buying her, cream-colored with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Finn wore his best suit, looking so handsome that Zara's heart skipped when she saw him waiting at the altar. Daniel stood as best man, and Sarah as maid of honor. Half the town showed up for the ceremony, these frontier people who had welcomed Zara as one of their own. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Finn kissed her with a passion that made the congregation chuckle, and Zara felt joy so complete it was almost overwhelming. This was her life now. This man, this place, this community. She belonged. The ranch became the Morrison family home in every sense. Zara continued teaching at the school in Mineral Park 3 days a week, riding the gentle mare Finn had bought her. The children adored her, and she found deep satisfaction in shaping young minds. On her days at home, she managed the household and helped with the ranch work that was suitable for her. Finn proved to be everything Zara had believed he would be as a husband: devoted, passionate, supportive. He encouraged her teaching, bragged about her accomplishments to anyone who would listen, and cherished her in countless small ways. They built a life together based on mutual respect and deep love. In the spring of 1885, Zara realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. When she told Finn, he lifted her and spun her around, laughing with delight, before setting her down carefully as though she might break. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're having a baby." Daniel was equally excited, already making plans for a cradle he would build. Sarah, who had recently become engaged to Daniel, started knitting tiny clothes. The whole ranch hummed with anticipation. The pregnancy was not easy. Zara suffered from terrible sickness in the early months and exhaustion throughout. But Finn was attentive to her every need, cutting back his work to spend more time with her, holding her when she felt miserable, reading to her in the evenings. Dr. Hartley from Mineral Park checked on her regularly and pronounced her healthy despite the discomfort. In late October, as the desert heat finally broke and cool autumn air returned, Zara went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next afternoon. Finn stayed by her side the entire time, letting her grip his hand hard enough to leave bruises, murmuring encouragement and love. When the baby finally arrived with a lusty cry, the midwife placed a squirming, red-faced boy in Zara's arms. "A son," Finn said hoarsely, tears streaming down his face unashamedly. "We have a son." They named him James after Zara's father, and he was beautiful. Dark hair like Finn's, and even in his tiny newborn face, Zara could see hints of his father's features. Holding him, looking at her husband's awed expression, Zara thought back to that terrible day in the desert when she had been sure she would die alone. How different her life had become. How blessed she was. James proved to be a happy baby, though colicky in the evenings. Finn walked the floor with him countless nights, singing off-key lullabies that somehow soothed the infant. Daniel was a doting uncle, and when he and Sarah married that December, James was present in Zara's arms, a beloved part of the growing family. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Finn and Daniel worked tirelessly, expanding their herd and improving the property. Zara taught when she could, though she took time away when James was very small. The community of Mineral Park became true friends, and the Morrison Ranch became known as a place of hospitality and warmth. In the summer of 1887, Zara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lily. She had Zara's blonde hair and Finn's green eyes, a striking combination. James, nearly 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. The ranch house rang with the sounds of children, and Zara had never been happier. Life was not without its hardships. The Arizona Territory was unforgiving, and there were droughts, cattle losses, injuries, and setbacks. But through it all, Zara and Finn faced everything together. Their love, forged in the crucible of her near death and his rescue, proved strong enough to weather any storm. One evening in the spring of 1889, Zara stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. James was playing in the yard with a stick he was pretending was a horse, while Lily napped inside. Finn came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the day you found me," Zara replied. "About how that was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life all at once." "I think about that day too," Finn said quietly. "I think about how close I came to riding a different path that morning, how easily I could have missed you, how different my life would be." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that wagon train had come back for me?" Zara asked. "If they had realized their mistake and turned around?" Finn tightened his arms around her. "Sometimes. But then I think that maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was fate. Maybe you were supposed to end up here with me, building this life." Zara turned in his arms to face him. "I don't believe they were right to leave me. That was cruelty, pure and simple. But I do believe that good came from it. I found where I truly belonged. I found you." "You're not alone," Finn said, echoing the words he had spoken that first day. "You never will be again." "Neither are you," Zara replied, rising to kiss him. "We have each other. We have our children. We have this life we built together. I wouldn't trade it for anything." As they stood together on the porch, James's laughter ringing out and the desert wind soft around them, Zara felt complete peace. Her journey west had been meant to take her to California, to her aunt, to an uncertain future. Instead, it had brought her here, to this man, to this land, to this love that sustained and fulfilled her. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Daniel and Sarah had their first child in 1890, a boy they named Thomas. The cousins grew up together on adjacent properties, Daniel having finally saved enough to buy land bordering Finn's ranch. The Morrison family expanded and thrived, becoming an established part of Mineral Park's community. Zara continued to teach off and on, beloved by generations of students. Finn's ranch became one of the most successful in the region, his reputation for honesty and hard work earning respect and steady business. They added to their family again in 1892, another son they named Samuel, and their home was full of noise and love and life. In the quiet moments, usually in the evenings after the children were in bed, Finn and Zara would sit together and talk about everything and nothing. They grew deeper in love with each passing year, their bond strengthened by shared trials and triumphs. Finn never stopped looking at Zara like she was the most precious thing in his world. Zara never stopped marveling at the kindness and strength of the man who had saved her life and then made it worth living. As their 10th wedding anniversary approached in 1894, Finn surprised Zara with a trip to Tucson, arranging for Daniel and Sarah to watch the children. They spent 3 days in the territorial capital, staying in a hotel, eating in restaurants, and walking through the streets like young lovers. On their anniversary night in their hotel room, Finn gave her a necklace to match her wedding ring, a gold chain with a turquoise pendant. 10 years, he said as he fastened it around her neck. 10 years since I found you in the desert. Best decade of my life. Mine too, Zara replied, turning to embrace him. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, more than I did when you proposed, more than I did when you first kissed me. Every day I love you more. I know exactly what you mean, Finn said against her hair. It keeps growing, doesn't it? The love just keeps expanding until I think my heart can't hold any more, and then it does anyway. They made love that night with the passion and tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies and hearts completely. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Zara thought about the girl she had been, lost in the desert and certain she would die. That girl could never have imagined this life, this love, this perfect contentment. The children grew. James became a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books like his father and had a gift with animals. Lily was spirited and adventurous, always climbing things she shouldn't, and getting into harmless mischief that exasperated and delighted her parents in equal measure. Samuel was the baby, sweet-natured and cuddly, content to follow his older siblings around. In 1896, Arizona territory was changing rapidly. More settlers arrived, more towns sprang up, and the wild frontier was gradually becoming civilized. Mineral Park, while still small, had grown significantly since Zara had first arrived. The school had expanded, needing 2 teachers now instead of 1. The town had proper streets, more shops, even a small library that Zara had helped establish. Through all the changes, the Morrison Ranch remained a constant. Finn and Zara had built something enduring, a legacy they would pass to their children. The house had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family. The land was well managed and productive. More importantly, the home was filled with love and laughter, a place where all were welcome. On a warm spring evening in 1897, the extended family gathered for Sunday supper as had become tradition. Daniel and Sarah were there with their 3 children. Several neighbors joined them. The long table Finn had built years ago was crowded with people and platters of food, conversations overlapping in comfortable chaos. After the meal, as the adults sat on the porch and the children played in the yard under the watchful eyes of the older ones, Daniel raised his glass. "A toast," he announced, "to Finn and Zara, who built this place, this family, this life we all get to share. You two are proof that good things can come from bad beginnings, that love and hard work can create something beautiful." "Hear, hear," Sarah agreed, others echoing the sentiment. Finn looked at Zara, and the love in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. He raised his own glass. "To Zara," he said, "who taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, who makes every day better just by being in it, who gave me a family and a purpose and more happiness than I ever thought I deserved. I love you." "I love you too," Zara replied, blinking back tears. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for seeing me when others looked away. Thank you for building this life with me." They clinked glasses, and the gathering erupted in warm applause. As the evening wore on and the stars came out, Zara sat beside her husband, surrounded by the family they had created and the friends who had become family, and knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued their steady march. The children grew into teenagers with their own dreams and personalities. James wanted to be a veterinarian, having developed his father's gentle way with injured creatures into a true calling. Lily announced she wanted to be a teacher like her mother. Samuel, still young, seemed destined for the ranch life, loving the land and animals with a passion that reminded everyone of Finn. In 1901, as the new century settled in, Finn and Zara celebrated their 17th anniversary. They had aged together gracefully, lines forming around their eyes and mouths from years of smiling and squinting against the desert sun. Finn's hair had threads of silver at the temples. Zara had a few gray strands she refused to be embarrassed about. They were in their early 40s now, settled and content. "You ever miss Missouri?" Finn asked one evening as they took one of their customary walks, a habit they had maintained throughout their marriage despite busy schedules and growing responsibilities. Zara considered the question seriously. "I miss my parents sometimes, though the pain has dulled over the years. But Missouri itself? No, this is home. This has always been home from the moment you found me." "I still remember every detail of that day," Finn admitted. "How scared I was that I'd found you too late. How light you felt when I lifted you onto copper. How you looked at me when you woke up properly, like I was some kind of hero. You were. You are." Zara stopped walking and turned to face him. The sunset painted them both in warm light. "Finn Morrison, you saved my life and then you taught me how to live again. Everything good in my life came from that day. Our children, this ranch, the friends we've made, the life we've built. But most of all, loving you is the best thing I've ever done." Finn cupped her face in his weathered hands. "Loving you is the best thing I've ever done too. You're my heart, Zara. Everything else is just details." They kissed as they had 1,000 times before, but it never got old, never lost its power to make Zara's pulse quicken. This was love, true and lasting. This was partnership. This was home. In 1903, James left for veterinary school in California, the first of their children to venture away from home. It was bittersweet for Zara, proud of her son's ambition but sad to see him go. Finn held her while she cried the night after James departed, understanding her tears without needing explanation. But James came home for holidays, full of stories and new knowledge. And he brought with him on one visit a young woman named Margaret, a veterinarian's daughter he had met in San Francisco. They married in 1905, and Zara gained a daughter-in-law who fit seamlessly into the family. Lily did indeed become a teacher, taking over Zara's position at the Mineral Park School when Zara finally retired in 1904. She was wonderful at it, patient and creative, beloved by her students. She married a rancher's son in 1906, a good man named Robert who reminded Zara a bit of a younger Finn. Samuel stayed on the ranch as expected, working side by side with his father. In 1908, he married a girl from Kingman named Alice, and they built a house on the property. The Morrison Ranch was becoming a true family compound, multiple generations working the land together. Daniel passed away suddenly in 1907, a heart attack taking him in his sleep at only 48. The loss devastated everyone, but especially Finn, who had lost his brother and best friend. Zara held him through his grief, providing the same steady support he had always given her. Sarah remained close to the family, her children helping to soften the blow of Daniel's absence. As 1910 dawned, Finn and Zara were grandparents several times over. James and Margaret had 2 children. Lily and Robert had one with another on the way. Samuel and Alice had just welcomed their first, a boy they named Daniel in honor of his great-uncle. The ranch house was constantly filled with the sounds of children playing, the next generation of Morrisons. On a warm June evening, Finn and Zara took their customary walk, moving slower now than they had in their youth, but still together. They were 51 and 49 respectively, their bodies bearing the marks of hard living and hard work, but their love undimmed. 26 years, Finn said, taking Zara's hand. 26 years since I found you in that desert. The best 26 years of my life, Zara replied. She paused, looking out over the land they had built their life on. You know what I think about sometimes? I think about that wagon train, about the people who left me behind. I wonder if they ever thought about me, if they ever felt guilty. Do you wish you could tell them how wrong they were? Finn asked gently. Zara shook her head. No, I don't think about them with anger anymore. I almost want to thank them, as strange as that sounds. If they hadn't abandoned me, I never would have met you. I never would have had this life. So in a way, their cruelty led to my greatest happiness. That's a generous way to look at it. It's the truth. I won't say they were right to leave me. That was wrong and it nearly killed me. But I can acknowledge that good came from evil, light from darkness, love from loss. She squeezed his hand. You taught me that, you know. You showed me that even in the worst moments there can be hope. Finn pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. We taught each other. That's what the best marriages are, I think. Two people making each other better, stronger, more complete. They walked back to the house as the stars came out, the same stars that had shone on Zara's darkest night and Finn's greatest discovery. Inside, the house glowed with lamplight and rang with the voices of their family. This was their legacy, built from a chance encounter in the desert, grown into something beautiful and enduring. The years that followed brought more changes. Arizona became a state in 1912, no longer a territory but a full member of the Union. Mineral Park continued to grow, though some of the smaller settlements around them faded as the mining industry shifted. The Morrison Ranch adapted and thrived, diversifying beyond just cattle to include crops and horses. Finn and Zara slowed down as they aged, letting their children take on more of the heavy work. But they remained active and engaged, Zara still helping occasionally at the school, Finn still overseeing the ranch operations. They were respected elders of the community now, their long marriage and strong family held up as an example. On their 30th anniversary in 1914, the entire extended family gathered for a huge celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house and spilled out into the yard. There was food and music and dancing. As the sun set, Finn stood with Zara under the same stars they had stood beneath so many times before. 30 years, my love, he said. 3 decades of life together, and I still fall in love with you more every day. Only 30 years, Zara teased gently. Feels like I've known you forever, like I was always meant to find you or be found by you. Maybe you were. Finn pulled her into a slow dance, humming the tune the fiddler was playing. Maybe everything in both our lives was leading to that day in the desert. All the pain, all the loss, it brought us to exactly the right moment. I believe that, Zara said, resting her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. I believe we were meant to be together. That your soul recognized mine when you found me, and that's why you said I wasn't alone. Because I wasn't. I had you, even before I knew it. They danced under the stars, surrounded by the family their love had created, and the circle was complete. The girl abandoned in the desert had found home. The lonely cowboy had found his heart. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love and family that would endure for generations. As they grew older still, Finn and Zara cherished each day together, knowing how precious time was. They sat on the porch in their 60s, watching grandchildren play in the same yard their children had played in, telling stories of the old days when the territory was wild and life was hard. No regrets. Finn asked one evening, the question he had asked her many times over the years. "Not a single one," Zara replied, as she always did. "Every hard moment, every trial, every sorrow brought me here to you, to this life. I wouldn't change anything. Even being left behind by that wagon train, especially that." Zara smiled at him, the same smile that had captured his heart decades ago. "Because it brought me to the moment you said those 4 words that changed my life." "You're not alone," Finn recited softly. "I'm not alone," Zara agreed. "I never have been from that moment on, and I never will be." They sat together as the desert night embraced them. Two souls who had found each other in the vastness of the Arizona landscape and built a love that had weathered every storm. The ranch stretched around them, testament to their hard work and determination. The house behind them echoed with the legacy of their love. And between them, still and always, was the connection forged that day in the desert when a dying woman's life was saved not just by rescue, but by the promise of never being alone again. As the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, Finn Morrison and Zara Morrison sat hand in hand, their love story written in the land itself, in the children and grandchildren who bore their blood and their values, in the community they had helped build. It was a story that had started with abandonment and despair, but had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. A story of how one man's kindness had saved a life, and how one woman's courage had saved a heart. A story of the American West in all its harshness and beauty, of the people who carved lives from unforgiving land and found joy in the struggle. But most of all, it was a love story, simple and profound, built on the foundation of those 4 words spoken on a desperate day. "You're not alone." And she never was again. In 1925, as Finn and Zara celebrated their 41st anniversary, they were 66 and 64 years old, respectively. Their children were grown with families of their own. Their grandchildren were starting to have children, making Finn and Zara great-grandparents. The ranch had passed primarily to Samuel's capable hands, though Finn still gave advice and helped where he could. They sat on the porch one evening, the same porch where they had courted and made promises and watched their family grow. Finn's hair was white now, and he moved with the careful deliberation of age. Zara's face was lined with the marks of a life well lived, her hair silver, her hands gnarled with arthritis. But when they looked at each other, they saw the young man and woman who had fallen in love in 1883. "Do you remember that first meal I cooked for you?" Zara asked, smiling at the memory. "You and Daniel ate like starving men." "We were starving men," Finn replied with a chuckle. "Starving for decent food and for something to make that house feel like a home. You gave us both." He reached over to take her hand, his grip still firm despite the tremor that had developed. "You gave me everything, Zara, a purpose, a family, a reason to be better than I was." "You were always good," Zara corrected gently. "You just needed someone to see it. And you did. From the beginning you saw me." Finn was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to think about a time when we're not sitting here together. I don't want to think about one of us without the other." "Then don't," Zara said firmly. "We're here now, we have today, we have this moment. That's always been enough." Finn pulled her close, and they sat watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and purple and gold, the same colors that had surrounded them on that first fateful day. The same land that had nearly claimed Zara's life had instead given her more life than she had ever imagined, more love than she had dared to hope for. As the stars began to appear, one by one, Zara thought about the girl she had been, terrified and alone in the wilderness. She thought about the moment she had heard hoofbeats and dared to hope. She thought about green eyes full of compassion and a voice saying words that had proven prophetic. "You're not alone." It had been a promise and a prediction, and Finn Morrison had spent more than 4 decades making sure it remained true. Through joy and sorrow, prosperity and hardship, sickness and health, they had faced everything together. The cowboy who had found a dying woman in the desert had become her husband, her partner, the father of her children, her home. And the woman who had been abandoned had become the center of a loving family, a respected member of her community, a teacher who had shaped young minds and, above all, the beloved wife of a good man. Their love story, born from tragedy and built on kindness, had become the foundation for multiple generations. The Morrison family would continue long after Finn and Zara were gone, carrying forward the values they had embodied: compassion, hard work, loyalty, and above all, love. As they sat together under the vast Arizona sky, Finn and Zara Morrison were content. They had lived fully and loved deeply. They had created something beautiful from almost nothing, had turned despair into hope, had built a legacy that would endure. The desert wind whispered around them, warm and familiar, carrying the scent of sage and promise. In the distance, a coyote howled and another answered. The land that had nearly killed Zara had instead given her life, real life, meaningful life. "I love you," Finn said softly, the words he had spoken thousands of times but which never lost their power. "I love you too," Zara replied, leaning into his warmth. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for everything." "Thank you for staying," Finn replied. "For choosing this life, for choosing me." "Always," Zara whispered, "always and forever." They sat together as night fell completely, stars blazing overhead in the clear desert sky. Two souls intertwined by fate and choice, by rescue and redemption, by a love that had started with a simple promise and grown into something magnificent. The cowboy and the woman he had saved, who had in turn saved him, living out their days in peace and contentment, surrounded by the fruits of their love. And in the quiet moments, in the space between heartbeats, they could still hear it, that first moment when everything changed. "You're not alone." And she never was, and he never was, and their love echoed through the generations, a testament to the power of compassion and the resilience of the human heart. The American West had been built by people like them, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, surviving and thriving in a harsh land through determination and love. As the years continued to pass, as Finn and Zara grew older still, they remained together, faithful and devoted to the end. When Finn passed peacefully in his sleep in 1932 at the age of 73, Zara held his hand and whispered that she would follow soon. And she did, joining him just 8 months later, unable to imagine life without her other half. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the endless Arizona sky. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren mourned them, but also celebrated them, the love story that had become family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The story of how Zara Nolan had been left behind by a wagon train in 1883 and saved by a cowboy named Finn Morrison. How he had told her she wasn't alone, and how that promise had shaped both their lives. How love had bloomed in the desert, strong and enduring, weathering every storm. The Morrison Ranch continued for decades more, generation after generation working the land their ancestors had tamed. And on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the mesquite and the stars blazed overhead, those who remembered said you could almost hear it, the echo of that first meeting, a dying woman's desperate hope, a cowboy's compassionate rescue, 4 words that changed everything. "You're not alone," and love, real and lasting, born from tragedy and grown into legend. The kind of love that built the West, that sustained families through hardship, that endured beyond death itself. The love story of Finn Morrison and Zara Nolan Morrison, the cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him in return, and together built something beautiful that would never truly end.